This call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I will now turn the meeting over to the ACCV Chair, Ms. Beth Luthi.
Thank you, Amanda. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to those of you who are joining us on the phone today. We apologize for starting a little bit late. We had a couple of technical difficulties, but are ready to go at this point. I wanted to really quick do a roll call. So I'm Beth Luthi, and I am present. Alexandra Stewart is present. Kathleen Gaffney is present. Tina Tan is present. John Howie is present. And Dino and Martha and Cody are not able to join the call at this moment. And then I also wanted to give the ex officio members just a moment to introduce themselves. Mike, I know that you're on the line. Mike is from the Immunization Safety Office. Did you want to?
Just to say hello. Hi, Mike.
Just to say hello. Hello. And then Anne, you're on the call as well?
Yes, good morning.
And can you, just for those who don't know, where you're from?
Sure, I work at the National Vaccine Program Office. I'm the communications director here, and it's a pleasure to be on the call. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Valerie? Valerie, I think we had some interference with yours. Let me come back to you. Jocelyn, you're on the line?
Yes, good morning. Jocelyn McIntosh, Senior Staff Attorney, Office of Special Masters.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Am I missing anyone?
Yeah, hi, this is Claire Schuster from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at NIH.
Hi, Claire. Any other ex officio members I've missed?
This is Valerie. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Valerie.
Hi. I am present on the line. I'm representing the Food and Drug Administration. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So our next item is public comment on agenda items. But before we move there, let me just remind everyone on the call that if you're not speaking, to go ahead and mute your line. And then also, as we move into public comment on agenda items and open the line for the public, I would just like to remind the public that at this point on the agenda, the comment is only on agenda items. There is a time later on in this meeting where public comment can be on any item. So Amanda, if you would be so kind as to see if we have any public comments on the agenda items at this time.
Thank you. If you have a comment, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name slowly and clearly when prompted. Your name is required. Again, that is *1 if you have a comment. One moment for our first comment. Our first comment comes from Teresa Rangam. Your line is open.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Teresa Rangam, and I'm the Executive Director for the National Vaccine Information Center, the mission of which is to prevent vaccine injury and death through public education and to defend the informed consent ethic in U.S. vaccine policies and laws. This morning we offer comment on the charge to the process working group to enhance interaction with the public. As I've publicly commented for about 2 years now, with regard to how petitions to add to the vaccine injury table are presented to the ACCV, there's a need for increased transparency and interaction with the public. Currently, HRSA responds to petitions with a PowerPoint presentation of about 15 to 20 minutes and then responds to ACCV Commissioner questions. However, there's no similar mechanism in place for parties that have requested the addition to the table. Again, NVIC strongly supports that members of the public bringing these petitions be allowed the same opportunity to present and respond to the Commission as given to HRSA. This addition to the process would allow the ACCV to have the richness of perspective as they consider the recommendations for each petition brought. We are hopeful that MVIC's outstanding request for such a process is part of the working group's agenda, as there is nothing in the law to prevent a process addition of this sort. Additionally, with regard to the VIS review, as an organization participating in collaboration with the CDC on VIS revisions, we encourage the ACCV to support more detailed information be present within the VIS, such as vaccine ingredients related to allergies, encouragement to review the vaccine manufacturer's product insert on the FDA's website, and to make the VIS about informed consent, as it was previous to the 1995 amendments to the law. While the law was amended in 1995, there is nothing to prevent the Secretary of Health and the CDC from making these additions in the interest of transparency and education with the public. Currently, all information is limited to an arbitrary front and back of one page. We encourage the ACCV to review the law, how it was amended, and what's really needed to inform and educate the public about disease, vaccines, and risks and benefits, both known and unknown. More complete information, as I'm describing today, would support the public's ability to make informed vaccine decisions and support the globally recognized human right of being able to exercise informed consent to medical risk-taking procedures, such as vaccination, which, as this commission well knows, carries the risk for injury and death. We appreciate the opportunity to comment on today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
At this time, there are no other questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Our next item of business is approval of our minutes from the June 2018 meeting. And let me just kind of point out while we're talking about meetings that we were hoping to have today's meeting in person. It just didn't work out that way, but we are hoping to have our December meeting in person. So the approval on, as far as the June 2018 minutes go, the minutes were dispersed via email, and I would like to ask the commission at this point if there are any corrections to the minutes.
No corrections?
I have no corrections. This is Alexandra.
Hearing no corrections, can I have a motion to approve the June 2018 minutes as dispersed?
So moved.
And
Second.
may I have a second? Thank you, Alexandra. We'll accept those as written. We'd like to move on next to our work group update, which actually Teresa was talking about a little bit in her public comment. The person who will be giving the work group update will be John Howie. John?
Beth, this is Tamara. Before you move on, the work group, the ACCV needs to vote because you did a first and a second, but then all in favor?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Tamara.
Thanks.
All right, John?
Yes, Beth, thank you. We just this year have formulated a work group with the idea that having a group of participants who meet on a regular, more frequent basis might be able to tackle some of the outstanding issues that we are all facing. I think we've had 3 or 4 meetings up to this point, and over the course of the 3 or 4 meetings, we have worked to identify a mission statement as well as certain tasks or projects that we're going to try and focus on. Top of the list has been to put together a recommendation to the Secretary of Health and Human Services requesting more resources be allocated to the various departments and parts of this vaccine injury program, including DOJ, HHS, and OSM. As of this morning, I believe we have a draft letter that has been circulated and that is going to be voted upon, and asking the Secretary to consider allocating more resources to address the backlog of claims and the amount of time that it's taken to get claims from start to finish. I would also note from Mrs. Wrangham that one of the other topics that this work group has discussed and is preparing to potentially tackle is this issue of the current process that is in place to present table changes. I understand that there was some frustration from the December meeting, and that is something that is certainly something that we're considering looking at. The real purpose of the work group is to try to encourage processes to promote increased interaction with the community members, and I think that over the course of our upcoming meetings we're going to continue to focus on what types of things we might be able to recommend that the committee consider in order to effectuate that. Thank you.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for John? Let me just point out really quick that the copy of the letter is marked and is in draft form. And what we would like to do is have all of the commissioners just have access to it right now. You can think about it over the break. We'll talk about it again and vote on it, hopefully later on this afternoon. The letter would be sent to the Secretary with the Commission's recommendations, assuming that the Commission approves it. For the public, if you would like to see a copy of the draft letter, if you would send an email to Annie. So the email address is aherzog@hrsA.gov. So one more time, aherzog@hrsA.gov. Were there any questions for John?
That very quickly, it's John Howie again. I said this draft was just circulated within minutes of the start of this meeting. There is a typographical error in the second to the last sentence of the paragraph below Table 1. I think that needs to say, but the backlog of unresolved claims is leading to delays in compensation.
Okay, Annie and Tamara, are you able to find that area? So page 1.
Paragraph immediately below Table 1, second to the last sentence.
But the backlog of unresolved claims is leading rather than lead to delays in compensation. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no further questions. Remember, that's a document that you can think about and look over as we're going throughout our meeting and over our break today. We'll move on to our next item of business, a report from the Division of Injury Compensation Programs by Dr. Nair. Dr. Nair, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Thank you.
Everyone. And again, this is Narayan Nair with the Division of Injury Compensation Programs, and I'll be providing the update. And I'm just working on advancing the slides, sorry. For today's meeting highlights, you'll receive an update of our activities here at HRSA. You'll receive an update on the Department of Justice vaccine litigation, and then that'll be followed by updates by the ACCV ex officio members, including FDA, CDC, NIH, and the National Vaccine Program Office. You've already heard the ACCV work group update, and then there'll be a discussion of vaccine information statements, a few of those statements related to 2 vaccines. So to start off with, presenting the number of petitions that have been filed, and this is up to date as of September 4th, 2018. The average annual number of petitions filed between fiscal year 2008 and 2012 was 410. And just as a reminder, the fiscal year that the federal government uses starts October 1st and is completed September 30th. So you can see that this table illustrates the increase each year in the number of claims that have been filed. In fiscal year 2017, we had 1,243 claims. This fiscal year, as of September 4th, we're up to 1,090. So we're very close to last year's total with a little less than a month remaining in this fiscal year. And this graph basically illustrates the increase in claims over the years. Basically, as I mentioned earlier, we are up to 1,243 claims last fiscal year, which is an increase of almost double from 2014. This slide illustrates the 5-year trend in number of claims, and it's versus the administrative funding. So you can see in 2013 we had 504 claims. Our administrative funding, and this is just for HRSA, this doesn't include funding for Department of Justice or the court. That number was 6.48 million. In 2014, the number of claims filed increased to 633. This was a 26% increase over the previous year. The administrative funding was relatively stable, slightly decreased versus the previous year. In 2015, the number of claims filed again increased to 803. This was a 27% increase. The administrative funding also was increased 7.5 million at that time, and it was a 16% increase in funding over the previous year. 2016, we saw a substantial increase in the number of claims filed, 1,120. This was a 39% increase, and our funding remained stable at $7.5 million. 2017, again, that number was 1,243, which was an 11% increase over the previous year. The administrative funding increased to $7.75 million, which was a 3% change. This fiscal year was the number of claims as of September 4th was 1,090. The administrative funding did increase to $9.2 million when the budget was passed this spring, and that's a 19% increase in the percentage change. This slide illustrates the number of claims that are awaiting to be assigned to be reviewed by medical officers within HRSA, and this is up to date as of September 4th, 2018. We've discussed this is sort of the backlog of claims. Claims that were filed with medical records in fiscal year 2017 have been assigned reviewers. All those claims have been assigned. For claims that have been filed in 2018, we have 612 claims that are awaiting assignment that have been filed with medical records that are awaiting to be assigned to a medical reviewer. I wanted to discuss the award amounts paid as of September 4th, 2018. You can see for fiscal year 2017, petitioner's award was $252 million, and attorney's fees and costs was $29 million. This fiscal year, to date of September 4th, we have $170 million in petitioner's award, and the attorney's fees is $25 million. With regard to the number of adjudications, for fiscal year 2017, we have 696 claims that were compensable, 183 that were dismissed for a total of 879. Fiscal year 2018, 417 were compensable, and dismissed was 156 for a total of 573. And then this slide goes into a little bit more detail. This is pulled from a slightly different database. So these numbers are, at least for fiscal year 2018, differ slightly just because of the database that's used. These are automated reports. These are up to date as of September 4th, 2018. And you can see for this fiscal year, compensable was 423. 155 of those, 37%, were concession. 56 were a court decision, 13%, and 212 were settlement or negotiated settlement. The not compensable was 131, and the adjudication total was 554. The trust fund, the balance as of July 31st is $3.7 billion. The activity, and this is from October 1st, 2017 to July 31st, the excise tax revenue is $193 million. The interest on investments, $56 million, for a total income of nearly $250 million. And the interest as a percentage of total income is 19%. And this, the source for this is the U.S. Treasury. Some other activities that we are participating in. There's an implementation of the maternal immunization provisions. We've discussed this. This is part of the 21st Century Cures Act that was passed by Congress and signed by the President. On April 4th, we issued a notice to propose rulemaking that would add the category of vaccines recommended for pregnant women, and this was published in the Federal Registry. We are accepting written comments from the public as long as they're submitted on or before October 1st of this year, and we're going to have a public hearing that's scheduled September 17th between 10 and 11:30 Eastern Time, and this will provide the public an opportunity to comment on this NPRM. We're continuing to engage in outreach activities, including a presentation that we gave to Adult Vaccine Access Coalition. This is a coalition of stakeholders interested in issues related to vaccination of adults. In this discussion focused, they were interested in learning about shoulder injuries related to vaccine administration or surgery. And then more information about the meetings, presentations, and minutes can be found on this website. And this is contact information for individuals wishing to participate in commission meetings and provide public comment. The phone number and email listed. Use these as the contact if you wish to provide public comment. And then lastly, the Division of Injury Compensation Programs is just one part of our agency, HRSA. And if you wish to learn more about HRSA, there's a number of different programs that support the health of Americans, including community health centers, programs related to delivery of care to individuals with HIV, organ transplantation, and many others that are housed within HRSA. And if you wish to learn more, please visit the HRSA website or sign up through one of these social media outlets. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Dr. Nair, this is Beth. I was wondering if you would be able to go back to slide 13 for just a moment with all of the contact information on it. Yes, no. Yes. And I just wanted to point out to the public that about halfway down that slide, there's an email for Annie in case it didn't come across very well on the telephone. There it is in print. And also, just to ask the commissioners if there are any questions for Dr. Nair at this time regarding his presentation.
No questions for Dr. Nair at this time?
Dr. Nair, this is John Howie. I do have one quick question for you.
Sure.
When you talk about the backlog of 612 cases, those are cases that have not been assigned to a reviewer, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Now, the only caveat is those are cases filed with medical records. Occasionally a case is filed and there are no medical records. Those generally don't go into the queue to be assigned until we receive some medical records for our review.
So the 612 is in addition to cases that aren't ready to be reviewed?
Correct.
Okay, and then when we talk about the fact that a case has been assigned to a reviewer, I mean, do we have another backlog in addition to the 612 that sits with the reviewer, or how does that work?
Generally, once it's reviewed, once it's assigned to a reviewer, and again, generally, if the medical records are adequate, those reports are generally completed fairly quickly. And when I say quickly, within a period of I want to say within 90 days or less, and then a recommendation is made to the Department of Justice.
Okay, so I mean, obviously it would be easy to say, well, we've cleared all our claims that were filed in 2017 because we've assigned them to reviewers. But if that just meant that the reviewer had a list of 50 cases sitting in his review stack, we wouldn't really be solving the problem, right?
Yeah, I don't have hard numbers in terms of how many reviews are sitting and, awaiting review. What I can tell you is that the reviewers are going through these as with alacrity as quickly as they can to try and, move these cases forward.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Nair, this is Beth. I think it was on slide 3 or 4 there was a graph. Yes, that's the one. It started in fiscal year 2007 and ended in fiscal year 2017, and you can see the amounts of claims that have been filed have been climbing pretty steadily since fiscal year 2012. My question is, do you know off the top of your head what year the flu vaccine was added to the vaccine injury table?
I can provide that to you. I don't know off the top of my head, but certainly it was right around that time frame. Yeah, actually what I'm hearing is 2005, which is what I was going to say, but I don't want to commit to it.
Okay, 2005.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so and again, that was sort of, after that is when we sort of saw this increase in adult claims.
Yeah, so just to be clear then, so when we start seeing, 401, 504, 603, it's this steady increase from there that the majority of those claims are actually adults and related to the flu vaccine. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think particularly in recent years, the transition where we, predominantly would see children, alleged injuries filed on behalf of children to adults, that occurred in that time frame in I want to say 2015, 2016. Around then is when we saw the transition.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Any further questions for Dr. Nair from any of the commissioners?
I have none.
I have none.
I have none.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nair. Let's move forward to our next item of business, a report from the Department of Justice.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Heather Perlman. I am an Assistant Director at the Department of Justice. I am providing the update on behalf of Catherine Reeves. The statistics that I'm going to report are from the reporting period of May 16th through August 15th of 2018. Dates on that period are different than the ICP's report, so if the numbers are different, that is why. The total number of petitions that were filed during the reporting period was 294. Of those, 277 were adults and 17 were minors. There were 198 claims adjudicated during this period. Of those, 139 were compensated, and that is broken down into 66 cases that were conceded by HHS and 73 that were not conceded, but were resolved via a settlement. There were also 59 cases that were not compensated and were dismissed, as well as 7 cases that were voluntarily withdrawn during the period. Turning to appeals, the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit issued 1 decision during the reporting period. Slide 5. That case was Diphtheria versus HHS, and the circuit affirmed a decision denying entitlement in a claim that alleged that an Mmwr vaccine caused pneumococcal pneumonia. During the rating period, there were 6 cases pending at the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. They were all appeals brought by petitioner. I can tell you that one case has been decided recently, and that is the Oliver case. That is the first case that is listed on the list. And the court affirmed the decision denying entitlement. It was a case involving a Tdap vaccine that was alleged to have caused a child's Dravet syndrome. At the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, there were 11 cases that were decided. About half were appeals brought by petitioner and about half appeals brought by the respondent. 6 dealt with attorney's fees issues and 5 dealt with entitlement. One of the notable decisions of an appeal that was brought by a respondent is Boatmon. That was a case in which there was an allegation that vaccines caused sudden infant death syndrome. The court overturned the special master's determination that entitlement was found and dismissed the case. There are presently also 11 cases pending at the Court of Federal Claims, and they are all appeals brought by petitioners. 4 deal with attorney's fees issues and 7 entitlement issues. There are no oral arguments scheduled at either the Federal Circuit or the Court of Federal Claims at this time. With regard to settlements, there were 73 adjudicated settlements during the reported period. Almost a good chunk of them were either Serva or GBS cases. And only 5 took more than 3 years to reach their final adjudication. I believe that is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hi, this is Kathy Gaffney. I had one question regarding your comment. I think it was a side comment when you had slide 8 up. Your voice, I think, trailed away, or my phone may be the problem, but you said something about an association with SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, and I was interested in that, and I couldn't quite hear what you said.
I'm sorry about that. I must have
now, the problem could be on my end.
Moved away. I was referencing the Boatmon decision. That's the first decision that is listed on slide 8. The special master had determined that vaccines caused the sudden infant death syndrome in the child. That case was appealed, and the judge vacated the decision and dismissed it and found that it was legal error.
Thank you. Got it.
Heather, this is Beth. Can you stay right on that slide that you're on, slide number 8?
Sure.
So the 2nd through the 5th case that is decided cases that are listed on that slide have in parentheses attorney fees and costs. So this is an appeal for attorney's fees and costs. Is that correct?
There are decisions that were issued by the special master, and the respondent appealed the decision. And yes, it relates to either the amount of or the amount of attorney's fees and costs that were awarded, if they were awarded at all.
Okay. And then towards the end, there was the slide where you were talking about Serva and GBS. It was like a table. I think there it is right there. Yeah, so for those who are listening, maybe members of the public who are unfamiliar with what Serva and GBS stands for, I was wondering if you would just explain what those acronyms mean.
Sure. Serva stands for shoulder injury related to vaccine administration, and GBS means Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a neurodemyelinating disease. Those are 2 allegations we get with the most frequency in the program, that a vaccine caused one of those 2 conditions.
And then for this reporting period between May 16th and August 15th, each one of these, I mean, I'm reading through them, but there are, well, I'm not quite sure about MMR. What, can you just remind me what MMR stands for in alleged injury?
Sure. MMR is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine.
So it looks like the vaccine is listed in the first column, the Tdap.
I see what you're saying. That's a very good point. Hang on one second. Yeah, we can look into it. I'm sorry. That is clearly a typo. Okay.
And then really what my question was is, it does say alleged injuries right at the top. I don't see death on any of those. If there were an alleged death caused by a vaccine, would it appear on this table?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any further questions for Heather? All right, thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is we'll take a short break. I think that'll help Tina out a little bit, a little fortuitous with the timing. What I need to know from the commission is, do you want the break to be 30 minutes?
I'm flexible with whatever Tina's got to deal with. That's Kathy Gaffney.
I'm flexible as well. I have two patients kind of back to back, one at 11:15 and one at 12. So, you know, depending upon how long it takes me to see the first patient, I may or may not be able to jump back on the call.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do a half hour. We'll give you the extra time there, and then we'll check in to see. So Annie, I just want to be clear. So everyone who is on the call, we have the leader number and code that you call in for, and should we say in, well, about 20 till the top of the hour? Is that okay with everyone?
Good with.
Okay, hearing no objection, then we'll take a short, it looks like it'll be about 28 minutes at this point, and we'll reconvene at 20 minutes till the top of the hour.
Sounds good.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
I would like to turn the call over to the ACCV Chair, Ms. Beth Lucy.
Thank you, Amanda. So we'll go ahead and resume. Our next item of business is a review of the vaccine information statements, and I believe Skip and Suzanne are on the call. If you guys don't mind introducing yourselves just before starting. And then just as a reminder with everyone else, if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your line.
Okay, hi, I'll go first. I'm Skip Wolf. I'm with the vaccine program at CDC, and we have got responsibility for producing the vaccine information statements, a couple of which we're going to be reviewing today.
And I am Suzanne Johnson de Leon. I'm also at CDC in the Communications and Education branch, and I work with Skip on the VIS.
Okay, shall we get started?
Yes.
Okay. I hope everybody can hear us. We had, I at least had a problem. It sounded for a while like the volume was going in and out, but I think I can hear everyone now, and I hope you can hear me.
Your voice is coming across well.
Okay. We've got two vaccine information statements to review. I assume that you've got copies of them that you're able to read along with us.
Yes, it looks like the first one they have pulled up is the meningococcal ACWY.
Okay.
They were also included in the meeting book.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We can do that one first. This should be the easier one of the two, because the only, as a bit of background, I guess you know that ACCV is one of the required reviewers for vaccine information statements. So this is part of the routine review process that each VIS has to go through. The reason we were updating the meningococcal one is because of the polysaccharide vaccine, the MPSV4, is no longer available. And really the only things we did with this VIS were remove all references to MPSV4. So it's essentially the same VIS that has already been approved, with a couple of removals. We're welcome to discuss other things if we want to, but that's really all we have to go through today. So there are a couple sections, both in section number 2, where it says meningococcal ACWY vaccine. The previous edition said vaccines, and there were about 2 paragraphs that had to do with the fact that there were 2 different vaccines and a brief description of the polysaccharide vaccine. Those items have been removed. Other than that, this VIS is essentially the same as the one that's been available for a while.
There are 2 small things, Skip, that we would want to highlight too. We did add a special line to include people with HIV as an indicated group at risk for vaccination. And then the wording about pregnancy and breastfeeding was tweaked slightly by our subject matter expert.
That's true. That's in section. That's in part 3, I believe.
Yep.
The pregnancy, and yes, it's basically the same information, but the format is a little different. And Suzanne's correct that we did add information about HIV.
So Skip, on the screen, I'm seeing they are showing section 1 and the first part of section 2.
Oh, you're able to see what they're seeing? Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on the phone, so I can't.
Should we ask them to scroll it forward? We're now at the top of the next page, and then it's section 3 and 4 on the screen.
Okay, you can't. Yeah, section 3, the change. Let's see. Before the statement we had last time is, not much is known about the risks of this vaccine for a pregnant woman or breastfeeding mother. However, pregnancy or breastfeeding are not reasons to avoid Mcne ACWY vaccination. A pregnant or breastfeeding woman should be vaccinated if she is at increased risk of meningococcal disease. We have a simpler statement in there now. One of the reasons that we're updating VISs is to make them easier to read, and that usually involves making things shorter and more concise. So the section you see there now that's headed "If you are pregnant or breastfeeding" is what we used to replace the section that I just read. If anybody has any comments about that or anything else about this VIS, please speak up. Otherwise, we can move on to the DTAP one.
Skip, this is Beth.
Hi.
So I often am the one to bring this same issue up, so forgive me for sounding a little like a broken record, but I notice that in section 2, right at the bottom of that first page, there is provider neutral language. Ask your healthcare provider for more information, rather than using the term doctor, since there are people like me, a nurse practitioner, and then also physician assistants who also advise people patients regarding vaccines. On section 3, last paragraph, your doctor can advise you I mean, I would just recommend keeping all the language the same and provider neutral, so it encompasses all of us who would be able to advise a patient. And I think it appears on the next page as well. So I say this every time. I'm sorry to be the one to.
Oh no. This is something that everybody we've been going around and around on this for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And what we try to do is generally use healthcare provider because it's more inclusive. Occasionally we will say doctor because we think it might be more advisable to use doctor in that situation, but that's just an arbitrary decision on our part.
Yeah. Yeah, and certainly I think people can probably make that leap from, well, it says that my doctor would report it on VAERS, but what if I don't see a doctor, you know, whereas as a nurse practitioner, I certainly report on VAERS as well.
One thing we heard years ago, the people who have done some research on this said that the term doctor, even though it's very specific, when people hear that, they don't necessarily think doctor, they think healthcare provider.
Yeah.
Now that may or may not still be true, but I still agree that it's better to say healthcare provider because that's what we mean.
Right, and just in keeping language consistent throughout the entire handout rather than switching back and forth.
Yeah, this is an issue that shows up on every VIS, and we'll consider switching to exclusively healthcare provider because, you know, it would be simpler, it would be more consistent, and I think people will know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Also, this is Suzanne, just to point out, this particular VIS is only being updated because we're trying to, as quickly as possible, remove the references to MPS v4. That's why it's updating now. But I think you're going to be pleased when we get to the next one we're reviewing, which kind of revamps some of the way the VIS is set up. I don't believe it says doctor anywhere on that document, and this is the direction we're transitioning to as we go forward, assuming that all of the reviewers like the approach. So there's a little bit of good news that you'll see in just a minute for what that might be worth.
Awesome. Thanks, Suzanne. Those were my only comments.
Okay. To expand on what Suzanne said, you'll see some formatting differences between the two, and that's the reason, because we just made minimal updates to the MCV VIS. Otherwise, it would have required a lot more work on everybody's part.
And more time, which was actually the bigger driving factor.
Yeah.
Do any of the commissioners have any other questions for Skip or Suzanne on this particular VIS statement?
No, but I support, this is Kathy Gaffney, I support Beth's comments, and my work is with low-income families and often Spanish-speaking, and it does help a lot if you use either the English or Spanish version of healthcare provider to include all of us.
Okay. Sounds like we're reaching unanimity on that point. Okay, if no further comments on that one, let's move on to the DTAP one, which is more of a complete update because new DTAP recommendations were just published by ACIP not long ago. Nevertheless, the substantive changes are not very extensive, but they're more in the line of format changes. But as we go through it, if there's, I've got copies of both the current and the updated, the old and both old and new versions. So if anybody has any questions about anything we've changed, I can refer back to the other one and we can discuss those as we move through. Probably the most efficient way to go through this, and the way we've done it in the past, is just start at the beginning and review each section one by one, and we'll take your comments as we go through. So does everybody have the draft up on the screen to be able to look at?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let's just start at the beginning with section 1, and we'll entertain any comments anybody has on it.
one thing you might notice is we have changed the order in which the antigens are presented up in that top section, so it follows the title of the diseases, the title of the vaccine. So diphtheria, then tetanus, and pertussis. And I want to point out that while this version that we submitted to ACCV, because of the slightly earlier deadline, shows DTaP, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis as its title, that has been updated. The title, when it's released, is DTaP, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis. So there's some consistency there, just to mention that.
Anybody notice that?
Yes. Good.
Hi, this is John Howie. I have a question. Is there a reason why this only talks about children receiving the Tdap?
Because only children receive it up to age 7.
John, so
Okay.
I think you're thinking about the Tdap.
Well, I'm thinking about, yeah, Tdap, TD, DT, various.
Yeah, Tdap and TD have separate VISs. And we used to mention them in passing here, but we even took that out because it's not really relevant. When a patient gets Tdap or TD, they'll get the appropriate VIS.
No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
I'm sure. Anything on section 1? One thing we added this time, if you'll notice as we talk about the 3 diseases, we put D, T, and AP in parentheses behind just so people know how the disease relates to the name of the vaccine. That's one small change that we made. We also added a little bit more information about the risk of the diseases because the mandate is to talk about the risks and benefits of the vaccine, and the best way to talk about the benefits of the vaccine, it seems, is to talk about the risk of the disease. So we added the section under diphtheria where we talk about killing tens of thousands of children every year, and talk about the 1 in 5 people who die from tetanus disease.
This is Alexandra. Would it be helpful to add a sentence at the end of section 1 discussing how some school systems and daycare centers require children to have been vaccinated against Tdap before entry? Have you even thought about that kind of thing?
Actually, no. It's in a way it's not. I mean, in a way it is relevant. In a way it isn't, because people will be getting the VIS when they're already there to receive the vaccine.
It might be worth pointing out that those rules and regulations are set at the state level, not at the federal level. So I'm not sure that
I'm aware.
To be just another consideration.
Yeah. Okay. That might be more appropriate after, if we were going to add that, probably after section 2 instead of section 1, where we talk about the vaccines as opposed to the, whoa. Mm-hmm. More comments on section 1? Okay, section 2 is fairly simple. We just mentioned the schedule. Mention that the vaccine can be given the same time as other vaccines. The only thing that's new here is the last sentence where we mention that basically the DTaP might be given as its own vaccine, or it might be part of a combination vaccine, because there are several combinations that contain DTaP. That's the only thing that changed in this section. Okay, if no comments there, we can move on to section 3. And here we made a major formatting change. There's not really much different in the way of content. But what we did is basically put the whole section in the form of tell your health provider if your child has these conditions, because that's really what we're talking about is contraindications or precautions. And because the VIS is intended for patients, or in this case, the patient's parent, our instruction to the parent is to let your healthcare provider know if the child has any of these conditions, and then the healthcare provider can decide what to do. In the previous edition, we had a little bit more background information, which we believed was not really relevant from the point of view of the patient.
Another thing that we did was put in a little line about how a small number of children should receive a different vaccine. That, of course, is referring to DT.
Yes. And the very first sentence there about DTaP being for only for children younger than 7, that was in the old in the previous VIS. It was just in a different section, so we just moved it. One thing I'd like to get your opinion on. Let's see, it's the last bullet under tell your healthcare provider if your child, and it says, had severe pain or swelling after a previous dose of DTaP or DT. That refers to Artus reaction, and I don't know if there's a better way to describe that. Artus has other symptoms that we didn't get into as far as describing it to a parent. So we wondered if this is, there's induration, edema, sometimes necrosis or hemorrhage that's associated with Artus. We didn't mention those, but so the question is, do we think that if a kid had an Artus reaction after a previous dose of vaccine, whether severe pain or swelling would be an adequate description for a parent to remember that?
This is Beth. So I'm just kind of thinking this through in my head. Severe pain or swelling, severe swelling would certainly cover any sort of edema, but I don't know that it covers necrosis.
Yeah, necrosis I think is pretty rare, and I don't know how we would even describe that in terms that would be clear to a lay audience. And there's also whole limb swelling, that's why we added the severe pain, because I don't think that's included with the whole limb swelling, which can also occur.
What about something like has had severe pain, swelling, or, the only word coming to mind is tissue damage, but I'm trying to think of a lay way of describing necrosis.
Yeah, this this draft has been seen by the CDC subject matter experts, and we couldn't come up with anything better either.
Okay.
Would it work to say any severe reaction and make it more general?
Well, that could include systemic reactions too, I suppose. It might be too broad. That's my point.
Okay.
Because this is really a very severe localized reaction.
Okay.
And I don't think it's very common, but still it's something that we really need to know about if it's happened.
Skip, this is Beth. I think I would just support that exactly the way it appears.
Okay, thanks. If anybody has any thoughts later, you're certainly welcome to contact us and let us know. Okay, any more comments on this section? There was in the previous version there was a section another section 4 that we just took out. And I referred to it a little bit earlier, where we mentioned that DTaP isn't licensed for older kids and that other vaccines called, Tdap and Td exist. Believing that was not really relevant under the circumstances, we just took that out and went straight to what used to be Section 5 is now Section 4, which is the risks.
And as Skip's mentioning these kinds of changes, it might be worth pointing out for anyone who isn't aware, this last DTaP VIS, the most recent one prior to the one we're discussing today, is extremely old. It was
2006, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it followed a totally different format from the more recent VISs. So we're actually coming more in line with more recent VISs in this layout in terms of the subheadings, just for information.
Yeah. And in terms of the way it's written too, because as I mentioned, we're trying to simplify it. There was more detail in the previous one. The idea, because what we keep hearing over and over is that patients or parents don't read VISs because they're too long and too complicated. So we're trying to keep the essential information in them, but make them simpler to read. So this section is shorter, has somewhat less detail, although we believe it has the detail it needs to have, and we hope easier to read than it was previously. If nobody has an immediate comment, there's one other question here that I'd like your information on, and again, it's about the way we describe a certain adverse event. And that's in the very last bullet there where it begins long-term seizures, coma, lowered consciousness. Lowered consciousness refers to hypotonic, hyporesponsive episodes, which we're certainly not going to use that phrase in a VIS. Do you believe that lowered consciousness adequately describes that in a way that a parent who would remember it if it occurred after a previous dose?
Yeah, I think it would.
Okay.
Mm.
Skip, this is Beth. So lowered consciousness, or the only other thing is maybe a change in consciousness rather than lowered, but I think lowered is fine.
Yeah, it's not. Frankly, I don't think it's a very good description, but it was the best we could do. A change in consciousness might actually be. It's something we should consider. That might be better.
Or loss of consciousness?
Well, that might be considered the same as a seizure, possibly. I don't know. It's a difficult concept to get across.
Yeah.
Or we could add loss or change. Maybe.
And I bet it's also very difficult to put in another language.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Another reason we have to try to word things as simply as we can.
Right.
Anything else in this section?
No.
Section 5, what if there's a serious problem? You'll notice that the format here is different from the format in the Mcne one, and that's just because this is a more updated version. This is the format we're using for the VISs that we're producing now. And this section, actually, this section, the next section, and the last section are pretty much boilerplate for all VISs. So if we make a change, if we recommend a change here, we may have to make the same change in all of them. Not that that's a problem, but just so you know.
And it's essentially the same information, but it is streamlined, it's shorter, and it is simplified. So it takes up much less space on the page, which gets toward making the entire VIS not as overwhelming to patients and parents.
Section 6 concerns the compensation program, which is a subject that should be near and dear to all of you. And that essentially hasn't changed very much. That we've worked that wording out years ago with the help of ACCV. The only change is the first sentence is the same. The second sentence contains basically the same information. We just simplified it slightly.
So, Skip, this is Beth. Can you just remind me then? So, this Section 6 with the telephone number and the website about the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program is on every single VIS statement?
Everyone that's for an injury table vaccine. Okay. Because the compensation program doesn't apply to, for example, adult vaccines.
Shingles vaccine.
To answer your question, yeah, it is on all the covered vaccines.
Yes.
But it wouldn't be, for example, travel vaccines that we don't cover that are purely for adults. It would
correct.
Be those VIS.
But it would appear on the influenza.
Yes.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
And Skip, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are available. I thought I saw something that they're available in 40 or 50 different languages, the VIS.
Yeah, one of our partners, the Immunization Action Coalition up in St. Paul, Minnesota, is responsible for getting these translated, and they work with different translation services around the country. And they're like 40. Not every one is translated into every language, but some of them are translated into as many as 40 languages. Virtually, I think all of them have been translated into Spanish. That's basically it. Any more comments?
Skip, this is Beth. So in both of these, so the meningococcal ACWY and then the Tdap, when do you anticipate on having those released, like widely available to the public?
The DTAP, when there's what we call an interim version, because it's basically a multi-month process to go through all the steps to get a final one done. So in order to get it into people's hands as soon as possible, we have what we call an interim VIS, which is reviewed by FDA and CDC and published as an interim while we're going through the process to get the final done. So that involves the ACCV review is one of those steps. There's what we call a consultation meeting that's required that includes members of parent groups and provider groups where we meet and have the same sort of discussion we're having here. And it also has to appear in the Federal Register for 60 days of public comment. Once all of that's been accomplished and we make any appropriate changes, then it goes through the CDC approval and clearance process. So it usually takes up to 6 months to get all of that done. So, and in other words, there is a version online now, which is the interim version, but the final version, which will include some changes, may not be available for several more months.
Thank you. And I was wondering, it sounds like maybe someone else has a question. Does someone else have a question?
So, Suzanne, I was trying to chime in to say that this actually also does apply to meninge as well. There's an interim up right now for both meninge and DTAP.
Thank you. My final question, Skip and Suzanne, actually relates to public comment that has come up before about VIS statements being utilized as like an informed consent document. I've had this conversation with people in my own state as well, and I was just wondering, since we have two experts here, have you heard some of that buzz, and how do you interpret informed consent and a VIS statement?
There's a legal definition of informed consent. We've talked with our own legal counsel about this. So there's no federal requirement for informed consent for vaccines. But if there is a state requirement for informed consent, and if the VIS meets the standards for that state's laws, it may be used as an informed consent form, but that's not its purpose. It's an information form to meet the information requirements of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. But it can be used as informed consent as long as it meets the state requirements.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you. Thanks,
everybody. Always a pleasure working with ACCV, I've got to say.
We are a great group.
I wish all of our job was this easy and fun. But thank you. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you for your time. Mm-hmm. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, an update from the Immunization Safety Office. Dr. Michael Mcne.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks very much. I'll have to ask you to advance the slides, so perhaps we could go to slide 3. So in this update, I'm actually going to give you an overview of presentations made at the June 21st, 22nd ACRP meeting. I have no presentations for meetings, but there are a number of selected publications, slides, and I think you were also earlier sent the PDFs. So moving on to the next slide. This is the influenza session at the ACRP. They summarize the season findings, and the first slide actually is not safety but efficacy. You're probably well aware that the season 2017-18 was a severe season, and the H3N2 viruses predominated. There are a couple of systems that are used to look at vaccine effectiveness, and you can see that the effectiveness was rather moderate. There was risk of outpatient visits for influenza-associated acute respiratory illness was reduced by about 40% in persons 6 months and older, and then adult vaccine efficacy estimates didn't really differ between outpatient and inpatients when it came to risk of influenza-associated hospitalization. Moving on to the next slide. There was a there was a presentation by the FDA that looked at a novel analysis of CMS data, and they were able to look at the comparison of efficacy between the cell-cultured and high-dose vaccines, and found these were marginally more effective than the egg-based standard dose quadrivalent vaccines. They were looking at hospital outcomes among persons aged 65 years or greater. Move on to the next slide. There was a presentation, as always, from the Immunization Safety Office. We summarized VAERS monitoring, and there were no new safety concerns detected during the season. The FDA also conducts monitoring, actually near real-time sequential monitoring using CMS data, and they did not detect any signal for Guillain-Barré syndrome. You remember a few years back they saw a tentative signal. And finally, the Vaccine Safety Data Link conducts rapid cycle analysis. They confirm no signals for the pre-specified outcomes that are listed. These are the typical 7 pre-specified outcomes. Next slide. The safety presentation also just made the committee aware of some studies that are being conducted by the CISA project in the office here. There are two of them. One looks at safety and immunogenicity of the adjuvanted Fluad vaccine versus Fluzone high dose in older adults. This is a randomized clinical trial over 2 seasons, and it's ongoing. And another study by CISA looks at fever after simultaneous versus sequential vaccination in young children. Again, you'll remember back about 2010-11, there was a suggestion that PTV13 and the inactivated flu together may have been resulting in more febrile reactions. This study is also in progress. Next slide. The safety presentation also included an update of a study. This is the Somnia study. This is an international study of 14 study sites that assessed the risk of narcolepsy following adjuvanted 2009 pandemic influenza vaccines. You'll remember there was a signal from Sweden and some of the other Scandinavian countries with narcolepsy following the ASO3 adjuvanted Pandemrix vaccine. This study was able to look at the Arapanrix ASO3 containing vaccine that was used in some other countries, and also the MF59 adjuvanted vaccine. They were able to conduct case control analyses that did not show evidence of an increased risk of narcolepsy, although they had very limited data for Pandemrix. They did see the signal in Sweden. In the Netherlands, they had to adopt a different method, allowing they had to do this case coverage analysis. This was because all other countries, the GPs had records of vaccination, and in the Netherlands they had to estimate coverage of the vaccine. They didn't have GP data on vaccinations. Next slide. There was also a presentation by a manufacturer, Seqirus. They make Fluad vaccine, the adjuvanted MF59 adjuvanted quadrivalent vaccine. This in the US is only recommended for 65 years and older, but this study was presenting some data on a clinical trial that looked at the adjuvanted quadrivalent vaccine, comparing it to Fluzone trivalent and quadrivalent in children. As has been found with other adjuvanted vaccines, there was a higher rate of local and systemic reactions. Most were short-lived, and there was some increased incidence of fever, but no increase in febrile convulsions. Overall, the assessment was that efficacy and immunogenicity was superior to the comparator vaccines. Next slide, please. As typical, beginning the new season, there were some changes made, and a vote was passed. A couple of the changes, these are detailed actually in MMWR published August 24th this year. The LARV vaccine is back after 2 seasons where it was not recommended due to poor efficacy. There are some changes in blue in the strains that are recommended and included in this coming season's vaccines. No change in the B. Yamagata virus that's included in the quadrivalent vaccine. There were also some minor tweaks extending the age range for some of the vaccines. Afluria quadrivalent, the age range was extended down to greater than 5 years. It was previously greater than 18 years. And also Fluarix quadrivalent, the age range was extended down. anyone older than 6 months, and it was previously age greater than or equal to 3-year-olds. Next slide, please. The HPV session, just to make the commissioners aware that a biologic license application has been filed to extend the age indication for 9-valent HPV through age 45 years in males and females. They're expected to get a ruling by October this year. A number of other countries and the European Medicine Agency have already approved use beyond the ages recommended in the US. Data for this is what's called bridging data, so there is data on the 4-valent HPV. As you'll see, one trial conducted in females 24 to 48 years showed high statistically significant efficacy against persistent infection. Next slide, please. The Mumps vaccine. In October, ACRP made a recommendation for use of 3rd dose MMR vaccine during mumps outbreaks. You can see the language. There have been concerns because cases and outbreaks have increased since 2012, and the mumps work group are working on updated guidance on how the 3rd dose would be implemented during an outbreak. Next slide, please. We come to the recombinant zoster vaccine, Shingrix. This contains the AS01 adjuvant. There was a session and some safety data were presented. This only takes it through to April, May. So there were no unusual patterns or unexpected adverse events. Just checking with the VAERS group earlier today, this vaccine is certainly, the uptake has been very rapid, and there are now nearly 7,000 reports. The vaccine safety data link, as of May 31st, there were 37,000 total doses administered in the 6 VSD sites. And today, checking again, there's over 130,000 doses administered in VSD. VSD will be conducting rapid cycle analysis. The protocol, I believe, is approved now at the sites, and you can see some of the adverse outcomes that will be monitored, including longer-term outcomes, potential immune-mediated diseases. There was a MMWR published on Shingrix. This had to do with administration errors. This was published May 25th this year, and there was perhaps confusion between the new Shingrix vaccine and the old live Zostavax vaccine. There were several differences in these vaccines. One is that the Shingrix vaccine is given intramuscularly, 2 doses, second dose 2 to 6 months after the first. The Zostavax was 1 dose given subcutaneously. Other errors were to do with refrigeration of the Shingrix vaccine, which is recommended versus storing the Zostavax vaccine frozen. The other one is Shingrix vaccine. There are 2 components, and there is one with the antigen and one with the AS01 adjuvant suspension that have to be mixed. In the Zostavax, there's only the single dose vial of lyophilized vaccine in a vial of sterile water diluent. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, just also on the Shingrix, there is plans for an MMWR reporting more detailed safety information from VAERS, and be scheduled hopefully before the next ACRP meeting in October. Thank you. Next slide. Pneumococcal vaccine. Pneumococcal PCV13. So in 2014, this was recommended together with PPS 23 for adults 65 years and older. It was felt that there was a lot of indirect effect from the pediatric program, and that questions raised about the actual benefit in the older age group. Safety of the PCV13 was reviewed. You'll see the information about VAERS. There were no unexpected data mining findings of safety signals or unexpected patterns observed. And there was a published study from the VSD that was also presented that did not support any increased rate of adverse events among those studied. Next slide, please. The assessment was that studies did strongly suggest a direct impact of PCV13 on the pneumococcal community-acquired pneumonia beyond the indirect effects benefiting from the pediatric program. So it certainly supported the direct PCV13 efficacy. The uptake of PCV13 is currently around 45% in the older age group. However, persons with lower socioeconomic status and minorities, it is lower. Pneumococcus is an important cause of chest X-ray positive community-acquired pneumonia among Native Americans. Invasive pneumococcal disease incidence has dramatically decreased for all racial groups, driven by the reduction in the PCV13 type invasive pneumococcal disease. And although it's largely eliminated a difference between blacks and whites, there are still some disparities among the non-vaccine types. Next slide, please. Just covering very briefly some publications. This first publication looked at lower respiratory tract infections following Rototec and Rotarix. This was stimulated by a manufacturer study that had suggested there might be an increase following these rotavirus vaccines. No significant difference was found in reports to VAERS. Next slide, please. A VSD study looked at the risk of spontaneous abortion after inadvertent human papillomavirus vaccination in pregnancy, and the findings were that there were no significant association with an increased risk of spontaneous abortion. Next slide, please. A study published looked at adverse events after vaccination among HIV positive persons. In VAERS, of course, HIV positive persons are at risk of a number of vaccine preventable diseases, and there is a need for caution and awareness of risk, particularly if they're exposed to live virus vaccines. Next slide. It was mentioned earlier that there have been update of the recommendations for diphtheria, tetanus containing and pertussis vaccines published in the Mmwr. There was also a review of VAERS data that informed that update published in Pediatrics, and the conclusions were no new or unexpected adverse events were detected. Next slide, please. A VSD study looked at the safety of repeated doses of Tdap vaccine in adults and adolescents. Of course, Tdap is recommended in pregnant women to be given with every pregnancy. Typically, adolescents and others would receive only a single dose of Tdap. However, there is possibility of receiving repeat Tdap vaccinations, and this study found that there was an acceptable safety profile relative to current practice, which would be Tdap followed by TD. Thank you. Next slide. Another publication, notes from the field. This is actually the Mmwr I mentioned earlier about the Shingrix vaccination errors. And I have one other publication just to mention. Sorry, I don't have a slide for it, but it's just out now in the September 2018 issue of the journal Pediatrics. This was a VSD study. The first author is Nailway, and it looked at primary ovarian insufficiency and adolescent vaccination. And the conclusions were that this was a single VSD site study, so it didn't include the entire VSD population. Their conclusions were they didn't find a statistically significant elevated risk of primary ovarian insufficiency after HPV, Tdap, or Mcne ACWY vaccination in this retrospective cohort, which should lessen concern about POI risk after adolescent vaccination. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil. Do any of the commissioners have a question for him? Dr. McNeil, this is Beth. I did have a question. It came up on several slides. The wording used was unexpected adverse events. So it would be like there were no unexpected adverse events. And my question is, what would be unexpected as compared to expected? For instance, would an expected adverse event be something that is perhaps listed on the vaccine information statement as a possible risk?
I think the big distinction would be injection site reactions, local reactions following vaccination, possibly those temporary systemic symptoms that are fleeting as the expected adverse events. And you're quite correct, they would be listed typically on the VIS. Other adverse events, of course, the package insert, less extensive adverse events sometimes that are subjects maybe of a single case report, and it's often difficult in those instances to really assign causality to the vaccine.
Yeah.
Does that? I hope that explains.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dr. McNeil?
No.
All right. Thank you, Dr. McNeil.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is an update on the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Are you ready, Claire?
Yes, hi, thank you. So first slide, please. Virus-like particles, or VLPs, are protein-based structures that mimic viruses and bind to antibodies. Because VLPs are not infectious, they show promise as vaccine platforms for many viral diseases, including influenza. Realizing that fine details about influenza VLPs were limited, a team of NIAID researchers who specialize in visualizing molecular structures developed a 3D model based on the 1918 H1 pandemic influenza virus. They believe that a better understanding of the molecular organization of influenza VLPs could help scientists develop effective seasonal and universal influenza vaccines. Their research could also benefit a range of other VLP vaccine projects, including for HIV, Ebola, and SARS coronavirus. This paper by D.M. McCraw et al. Was published online in Scientific Reports in July. Next slide, please. As we've mentioned at previous ACCV meetings, In February 2018, NIAID launched a strategic plan for developing a universal influenza vaccine. NIAID is actively supporting efforts to encourage research and progress towards development of a universal influenza vaccine that would provide durable protection against multiple influenza strains. Next slide, please. So the next few slides that I'm going to show focus on new funding opportunities. So these are areas or opportunities where we aren't currently funding projects, but we're hoping to spark interest from the scientific community and responses to these funding opportunities. In July 2018, NIAID announced 2 funding opportunities to advance universal influenza vaccine research, and these are Program Announcement, or PA 18859, and Program Announcement 18858. These program announcements will support research aligned with focus areas from NIAID's Universal Influenza Vaccine Strategic Plan, including transmission, natural history and pathogenesis, characterization of influenza immunity and correlates of protection, as well as rational design of universal influenza vaccines. And rational design means strategic design of a vaccine that, for example, would have the right antigen, delivery platform, and adjuvant if needed, that will show a predictable function based on the current scientific understanding of pathogenesis and vaccine mechanism. Next slide, please. Also in July 2018, NIAID began soliciting proposals for a new program known as the Collaborative Influenza Vaccine Innovation Centers, or CIVICs. Proposals are due to NIAID by the end of November. CIVIC's objectives include both improvements to seasonal influenza vaccine as well as development of universal influenza vaccines. Activities may include preclinical studies of influenza vaccine candidates, early phase clinical trials, and healthy volunteer human challenge studies in which researchers expose a person to influenza virus and then study influenza through the body's natural healing process. Participants are closely monitored and cared for during these studies. Information gained through challenge studies may help to find better ways to prevent influenza and improve treatment options. Next slide, please. The NIH and CDC have jointly supported program announcements on vaccine safety research since 2008. The latest iterations of these program announcements were released in July 2018. Next slide, please. This slide shows the focus areas covered in the vaccine safety program announcements, including physiological and immunological responses, how genetic variations affect these responses, risk factors and biological markers, statistical methodologies, genomic technologies and systems biology, as well as vaccine combinations and different vaccine schedules. Since 2009, NIH has funded 24 awards under these announcements. Next slide, please. NIH has formed the Trans-NIH Pediatric Research Consortium to coordinate pediatric research programs across its 27 institutes and centers. Nearly all of these fund some aspects of child health research. As you see on the slide, this support totaled more than $4 billion in fiscal year 2017. The consortium seeks to harmonize pediatric research activities, explore research gaps and opportunities, and establish priorities. In addition to project-based interactions, the full consortium will meet several times a year to discuss scientific opportunities and possible new collaborations, including efforts to enhance research training for the next generation of pediatricians. And I have one final update that's not in the slides, but I wanted to mention that in August 2018, NIAID announced that a first-in-human trial of an experimental live attenuated Zika virus vaccine developed by NIAID scientists has begun at the Johns Hopkins Center for Immunization Research in Baltimore and at the Vaccine Testing Center at the University of Vermont in Burlington. NIAID is sponsoring this trial. The trial will enroll a total of 28 healthy non-pregnant adults ages 18 to 50, and this phase 1 clinical trial will assess the experimental vaccine safety and generation of an immune response. And that concludes my presentation for today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Claire Schuster?
Not at this time.
All right. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and move on next. An update on the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. Valerie?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I will have a very brief update for you today. Next slide, please. The FDA approved supplements for the biologics license applications for seasonal influenza vaccines to include the 2018-2019 United States formulation and associated labeling revisions. Next slide, please. Over the last several years, there's been growing scientific and public interest in the role of microorganisms in the maintenance of overall health and prevention and treatment of disease. Given the strong interest in rapidly evolving science in this field, the FDA is convening a workshop co-hosted with the NIH on September 17th that will discuss microbiome-based products and how manipulation of the microbiome may potentially be used to prevent or treat a variety of different diseases. The workshop will include presentations on a variety of topics, including the regulatory framework for live microbiome-based products, safety and effectiveness of live microbiome-based products, used to prevent, treat, or cure diseases in humans, and strain selection for these products. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie, I think I should have addressed you as Commander. I apologize for that.
No problem. Val is good.
Are there any questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move forward. Thank you. We're running just a few minutes ahead. The next item is an update from the National Vaccine Program Office. Ann Aiken.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ann Aiken. I'm the Communications Director here at MVP. I'm a relatively new representative on this committee, but I'm enjoying what I'm learning from you guys so far. Can you go ahead and go to the next slide? I'm going to also give a very brief update. And next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about NVAC. So the National Vaccine Advisory Committee just released a report. It was published recently online in Public Health Reports, and it's called Strengthening the Effectiveness of National, State, and Local Efforts to Improve HPV Vaccination Coverage in the United States. And it focuses basically on 4 key areas that were based on a charge from the Assistant Secretary for Health, looking at additional national partners that we could work with, coalitions that we would work with at the state and local levels, ways we could engage integrated healthcare delivery networks, and also ways that we could address provider needs in rural areas. And so the report is now available on the MVPO website. There's a link to it if you want to read the full report. And next slide. We've also released our meeting dates for 2019. We have a meeting coming up here next week at the Humphrey Building in Washington, D.C. It's a public meeting, and the agenda is now available online. And we've released our proposed dates for 2019. The February meeting will be just a half-day virtual meeting, but the June and September meetings will be 2-day in-person meetings. And we'll be updating our website during that process to provide more information on these meetings, so check that if you're interested in any of these. So next slide. The other thing I wanted to update folks on, since I don't think we have done that yet, but we released a report several months ago based it was a report to Congress from the 21st Century Cures Act that Narayan had mentioned that required us to submit a report on encouraging vaccine innovation. And we took several months to sort of work through a steering committee and also met with a lot of experts in the writing of the report. And if we could go to the next slide. And sort of some of the main highlights of the report is that the vaccine enterprise is well established. It's been very successful in bringing new and improved vaccines to the market. There's over 120 vaccine candidates that were under development when the report was written. And there are a lot of domestic and global partners that we need to work with, but the system is complex. If we can go to the next slide, they sort of highlighted three major challenges, including the prevailing business model that prioritizes vaccine candidates with large markets. But what we're seeing is that some of the market sizes are likely smaller for some of the vaccine targets that we'll be seeing. There's also a lot of discussion about the substantial investment that's needed to address some of the complex needs of the remaining targets. And finally, uncertainty in public health priorities or the public demand that some of these candidates would have. And so what's the return on investment for that? And next slide. So this is just an image that sort of shows how, you know, how complex the system is and how long it takes. And, you know, what we start off with lots of different things in the beginning stages, but it really does, dwindle down as we get to licensed products. And then next slide. The report is available online as well if folks want to read that on the MVPO website. And next slide. The other thing I wanted to sort of talk about is we just released a Your Best Shot video series. These aren't sort of the normal videos you may see with some campaign sort of things. These are more educational in nature. They're a little bit longer than what you might expect, of about 3 minutes. But we wanted to highlight the importance of vaccines across the lifespan. So we picked 3 vaccines to sort of highlight in the first part of the series. Shingles, which is obviously not for children, but pneumococcal and whooping cough. And we spent a lot of time user testing these videos with different members of the target audience and working with experts across the system to make sure that our messaging was correct and accurate, but also easy to understand. And we created these sort of kind of fun characters, which you can see on the slide there. The whole video series is now available online. And I should also say that we work with the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion to create the videos. And then the final thing is I just wanted to update you guys on the fact that we went through a major content refresh on vaccines.gov. Vaccines.gov is an award-winning website that was developed in 2011 with the mission of providing trusted and consumer-friendly information about vaccines and vaccine-preventable diseases, and to really sort of answer questions that people have. And so we had definitely unprecedented levels of collaboration with different partners, and really appreciate the work that a lot of people on this call, or a lot of agencies on this call, help with, and it's available in both English and Spanish. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. If I can ask a question really quick, this is Beth. I didn't catch the date on when the presentation was delivered to Congress. Was that this year?
I think it was February of this year, but let me just go ahead and pull that up. I can tell you exactly when that was.
And was that to all of Congress, or were you presenting to a committee?
It was to a committee.
Okay.
sorry, it's taking me just a second to pull it up online. December of 2017, so I stand corrected.
Okay. Okay. And it was well received by the committee members?
So this report was not a National Vaccine Advisory Committee report. It was a report that the National Vaccine Program Office did. And so, but we did work with a lot of different partners and made sure that folks were happy with it, and then we submitted it to Congress. So.
Okay, good.
It was also at the last June meeting, the person that wrote it, Captain Angela Shin, presented on it at the last National Vaccine Advisory Committee, and there was quite a bit of discussion on the report and a lot of interest in it and different ways that we can encourage vaccine innovation. So at the next National Vaccine Advisory Committee meeting, there will be quite a few presentations focusing on vaccine innovation and really trying to be responsive from the discussion that was held at the last June meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Anne? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Anne, for your presentation.
Thank you.
I think what we'd like to do next is move on to public comments. Amanda, are you able to help facilitate public comment at this time?
Yes, of course. Thank you. If you have a comment, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name slowly and clearly when prompted. Your name is required. Again, that is *1 if you have a comment. One moment. Our first comment comes from Teresa Rangam. Your line is open.
Good afternoon.
Looks like her line got disconnected somehow, so at this time there are no comments.
Let's, if we can, let's give that just a couple of minutes and see if Teresa will call back in again.
Sounds great. It does look like she's calling back in now, so one moment, please. Our next comment comes from Teresa Rangam. Your line is open.
Thanks for waiting and reconnecting me. I'll start over. I'm not sure where I got dropped. Again, my name is Teresa Rangam. I'm MVIC's Executive Director, and I appreciate the opportunity to offer a comment today. During today's DCIP presentation, I believe there was mention of the inclusion of stakeholders in the MPRM process. On behalf of MVIC, I would like to respectfully say that MVIC has historically worked with the ACCV, and the MVAC has successfully sponsored members onto these committees, coordinated vaccine safety workshops with the IOM, as well as having been invited to present parent perspective to the IOM in their reporting process. In recent years, MVIC appears to have been excluded from various stakeholder processes in which we have standing. This is of concern to us given our historic standing and involvement in processes relating to vaccine safety and vaccine injury and death, and the fact that our organization worked with Congress to pass the 1986 Act. We welcome and request the inclusion in stakeholder processes relating to this commission and what is put before the commission for their consideration, as we represent the concerns of those who have vaccine safety concerns and those who are injured or who die as a result of vaccine adverse events. As the process working group assesses various improvements and considers recommendations, MVIC requests the Commission to consider reviewing the 2009 Alterum and 2010 Banyan reports issued to a previous Commission and the 2014 GAO VICP report and consider their findings and recommendations relating to the need for a mechanism to gauge ongoing petitioner satisfaction within the VICP and adequacy of VICP awards. We base this request in part on the December 2016 ACCV meeting and the DOJ's report on a case where a successful VICP petitioner felt their injury award was inadequate and requested the amount to be revisited. Currently, there is no mechanism or measure of satisfaction or adequacy to measure this metric. The purpose of the VICP was to compensate those injured by vaccines, and it's important to be able to understand if the process is working well and if the compensation awarded is adequate to meet the needs of those injured, because many times those injured and those awards are for lifelong continuum of care. These are basic program metrics that should be put in place as a matter of routine. In addition to our previous agenda comment, I want to clarify that MVIC works in consultation with the CDC and not in collaboration with regard to VIS revisions. We appreciate Commissioner comments on provider-neutral language and support provider-neutral language in the VIS as it acknowledges the reality of the variety of professionals that are vaccine providers today. In addition, while the VIS doesn't provide informed consent, MVIC worked with Congress to put into place informed consent protections within the 1986 Act that resulted in the VIS, meaning the VIS provided information on diseases and the risks and benefits associated with vaccines prior to vaccination. Many of those protections were struck from the law in 1995 to simplify the VIS at the cost of transparency and information relevant to making educated vaccine decisions. NVIC would again encourage the ACCV to review those changes in the law and the fact that there is nothing preventing reinstating previously required information to the VIS, as the Secretary can add information outside of what the law specifies. MVIC would also state that the purpose of the VIS was to provide information prior to vaccination, and the opening statement of why get vaccinated is a marketing line, rather than information about vaccine risks and benefits or information about the disease. MVIC supports more neutral language versus marketing language within the VIS. We appreciate information on disease and note that prior to the 1995 amendment to the law, more information was available on the VIS. It would also be helpful to consumers to understand mortality rates prior to the vaccine's introduction and how the vaccine has mediated this most severe outcome. With regard to pregnant women mentioned in the VIS, it would be helpful to note which vaccines are licensed for use in this population. regarding mention of the VICP on the VIS. As all on the Commission are aware, there's a statute of limitations for vaccine injury compensation, and consumers would benefit from a statement appearing on the VIS that contains more specificity on these deadlines. Of note, the Alterum or Banyan report indicate that consumers want more detail, not less, where vaccine injuries are concerned. So again, MVIC would encourage the ACCV to review the findings of these reports and how they may apply to VAIS revision work and the ACCV's overall charge. Finally, MVIC notes that there is a funding of vaccine innovation while there are significant gaps in vaccine safety research, as noted by over 25 years of IOM reports for vaccines already in use today. We ask what efforts to fund quality independent research to close these gaps are underway. The ACCV has previously voiced the same concern relating to closing gaps identified by the IOM. Our concern continues to be that vaccines are being created and mandated faster than the research that assures the public that they are safe and or what their associated risks are so that consumers may make educated vaccine decisions. In closing, we appreciate the work of the ACCV and the charge undertaken by the Process Working Group. Thank you again for the opportunity to offer public comment.
Thank you. At this time, we have no further comments. As a reminder, please press star 1. At this time, there are no further comments.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to Teresa for her thoughtful comments. What I need to do is just check really quick to do a roll call on who is on the line. This is Beth. Alexandra, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And Kathy, are you still on the line?
I am.
And Tina, are you on the line? And Cody, are you on the line? And just double checking to see if Martha was able to make it. And John?
I'm here.
And just double checking to see if Dina was able to make it. Okay. So we need to be able to have a quorum present to vote on the letter that has been proposed to the Secretary. Go ahead, Annie.
Before, do we want to have the operator check and make sure none of them are in listen-only mode?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
And Cody Meisner.
Amanda, were you able to hear that?
Yes, of course. If any of you are on the line, please press star 0 so I can open up your lines. Again, that's star 0 to open your lines. I do not have any response.
Okay, thank you. So Annie, as I understand it, what we'll need to do is to hold a commissioner vote in the December meeting.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that gives people plenty of time to look through the proposed letter. We did have the one correction by John, changing the word from lead to leading. Let's see. So Kathy, I think you were the only one who wasn't on the work group meeting where all of the changes were discussed. But in your looking over the document, did you have any thoughts?
No, a lot of good work went into it, and I thought it was well done. I don't have it up in front of me now, but the line where they changed a minimum of 8.
Kathy?
Yes?
Sorry, we really shouldn't be discussing it because...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if we could go ahead and get the feedback from Kathy while she was present, but you're advising us to just hold on that altogether.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for always keeping us straight, Annie. We need some of that. Let's talk about future agenda items and new business. I have a couple of thoughts, one of which is the work group that has been meeting diligently to try to draft the letter to the Secretary. I wondered about, do we continue the work of that work group in discussing some of the difficulty of the cases and attorney fees, and actually, or do we need a separate work group to discuss those things? What are your thoughts?
I think they're appropriate for the process work group, says Alexandra.
Okay. And John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I want to make sure I was clear when I raised the issue of attorney's fees. It was really more in line with the language in the draft letter that we were putting together. So it's certainly something that there would be a lot to talk about, but I wasn't trying to suggest that it needed to be placed ahead of any of the other things that we've talked about trying to do in the work group.
Okay. The issue that came up with the difficulty of some of the cases that you mentioned,
yes.
Yeah, do you mind, just because Kathy was not on that call this morning, just kind of sharing a couple of your thoughts so she understands what the concern is?
Sure, I'm happy to. What I had expressed earlier today is that because of some of the opinions that have been coming out of the courts in regards to attorney's fees and what a reasonable good faith basis is, as a lawyer in the program provides for payment for attorney's fees even in unsuccessful cases, but it's not that black and white, as many things aren't. There's a lot of gray area, and you still have to be able to demonstrate that there was a reasonable good faith basis to bring the claim. And because of the way that some of the opinions have come out, there are lawyers that are scared of taking cases that have statutes of limitations impending, for fear that they're going to take the case without being able to get medical records and without being able to review things and without being able to evaluate the case. They're going to have to file that case to make sure they don't commit malpractice. And then after they start getting information together, they realize, well, this case isn't going to work. I'm not going to pursue it. I think there's an open question at this point as to whether or not that attorney is going to get paid. And what that means is that, if you get a call from somebody who says, I got a vaccine 3 years ago, and my first sign or symptom was the day of my vaccine, and you're looking at a client, you're telling them, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I think another issue, and this may tie into the increase in adult cases that we're seeing, it may not. That may just be a function of the influenza vaccine being more prevalent and being given more than other vaccines. But I do know that a lot of lawyers are looking at complicated child cases that have complicated issues that underlie them and say, why do I want to take this complicated case? Because if I take this complicated case and I make a good faith effort in it, I might not get paid, and instead I can go take an easy case where I know I'm going to get paid. And I think a lot of this has a potential effect on the ability of people to obtain representation under the program. So my comments in regards to the letter today really, again, were more, I just didn't think that the language in that letter was fair and accurately, it was a fair and accurate depiction of the system and how it works. And that brought us to the conversation about, lawyers and cases and people not being able to get represented, and that's where we are.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. So after listening to you, I agree with Alexandra. I mean, it does seem to be part of process, and that's what the work group is working on. So what we'll need to do is we'll just need to bring that to Martha's attention as the chair of that work group, and then perhaps we can discuss some ways of helping, to get more information and to assist in that matter. The other thing that I would like a little more information on, and I'm thinking this is probably the point in the agenda when it would come up, would be some commentary, the public comment from Ms. Rangam about the law regarding informed consent and the VIS statement. And I'm wondering, Annie and Tamara and Narayan, if the commission could have a presentation on that in our December meeting, just so we understand a little bit better what some of the history is. And tell me what you think about that, and if this is where that would go in the agenda.
Yeah, we can look at that issue. Excuse me. We'd have to think about who we would bring in, because informed consent, again, as was mentioned, it's not a federal issue. It's at the state, in some cases maybe the local level. So, but, if that's of interest to the commission, we can certainly discuss with you what you want to hear and try and find a speaker, provide the information that you would like.
I mean, I would be interested in learning a little more about it. Are there any other commissioners that would be interested in the same topic?
We might, this is Alexandra, you might want to confine that discussion to the process work group before we bring it out to the full commission.
Okay. All right. I think that sounds like a great idea. So I'll take that up with Martha and see how that goes. Any other new business or ideas for future agenda items that any of the commissioners have before we adjourn?
Beth, just briefly, and I think this has been discussed in the work group as a potential topic, but Mrs. Rangam also brought forward again today this issue of, how the public gets to respond or present table amendment items or petitions for table amendments. And it seems to be a topic that really has kind of woven its way through every one of our meetings since December. And I don't know that it's something that we've really taken head on yet, but I think it may be something we want to think about.
Thanks, John. I know we've discussed a little bit of that in work group meeting, and certainly feel that that Martha feels very, very strongly about that. So what I'm hearing is we have work to do on the work group. That's what I hear.
I agree with you. This is for the work group, these discussions, not for the open group yet.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Any final items? Thank you to everyone for your participation, and thank you to all of the presenters for their thoughtful presentations and for the public comment that we've received. So what we'll do is we'll plan on meeting in person in the December meeting. More information to come on that in the future. And with nothing else, if I could have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Kathy, and a second. Thank you. And then all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. We are adjourned, and I will see some of you in the meantime in work group meeting. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.